Hello, welcome to the second episode of the Talktagon. My name is Ty O'Keefe, and my co-host Craig Allen is standing by rather, to talk with me about Colby Covington of all things. Currently, Mr. Covington is enjoying the last days of his reign as the UFC's interim welterweight champion. I don't know if you heard, but he's about to be stripped of his belt, and probably rightfully so. But before that, we like to talk to Mr. Craig Allen and see what he thinks about Mr. Covington. And I know he's got some feelings about the idea of the interim belt itself. So, Mr. Allen, without further ado, educate us.
Ty, I really appreciate you having me on for the second episode of the Talktagon. I have a differing opinion than most in some respects. I mean, interim belts to me, they make a little bit of sense. It's more or less you have a defined number one contender, and therefore with an interim belt, it's basically automatically a title shot rather than having a number one contender. They moved away from those number one contender matches in the past couple of years. And actually, viewership on those pay per views have been down. I don't know if you had a chance to watch, but MMA on Point had a video on YouTube today detailing how ratings for those interim title fights range between 150,000 to 250,000 pay-per-view buys on average. So it's not looking good for the interim titles. Now, as far as Colby Covington's concerned, I mean, since he's joined the UFC, he's gone 9-1, only lost to Warley Alves, who's a hit or miss fighter. He's been on an uptick here recently, but I mean, UFC 225, the co-main event was based around Rafael dos Anjos and Colby Covington. Their rivalry, the bad blood between Colby Covington and Brazilian people everywhere, really. I don't really like the attitude he has. He's a brash type of guy. His trash talk's not totally refined, but you got to take him at his word. I mean, he said he was going to make his way to the White House, and lo and behold, he was able to make it there.
But in terms of and yes, I mean that did kind of surprise me, right? I mean, to say that you're going to take the belt to the White House and then capitalize on his connection with Dana White so that he could go to the White House and actually do this. I mean, yeah, okay, we're talking about it, so it's worth something. But what do you think about his position in the welterweight title picture now that they are saying Till's going to fight Woodley?
I mean, I looked into it a little bit more today. So more or less, if you go onto the UFC's website right now, it's official for UFC 228. It's Till Woodley. I wasn't totally sure if it was 100% official, if it was just hearsay or whatnot, but it seems as if Colby Covington's been stripped. From the press releases and the different things from both the White House and the UFC. It was just a belt that was given to Donald Trump. It wasn't, Colby Covington's interim belt that he had around his shoulder. And
Very
I
good
guess,
point. Very
yeah,
good point.
I guess it was kind of a symbolic gesture. I'm not going to get too much into the politics, but, you know, uh, Dana White spoke at the Republican National Convention before Donald Trump was elected
Yeah, and
as
a lot of
president.
MMA fans don't know that. And I mean, politics aside, but it's worth
Yeah.
knowing that Dana White did speak at the Republican
So
National Convention.
the whole purpose of him speaking there was to kind of give Trump a nod back to the UFC's early days when they were trying to claw for venues, and Donald Trump opened up one of his venues, allowed the UFC to compete there. So Dana
Back in the
White's
days of human cockfighting, they called it back then.
yeah, and Dana White kind of I don't know if you'd say owed him, but as a sign of respect, went to the White House and did a little bit of a photo op there with Colby Covington.
And you're absolutely right. At this point, I hate to stop the conversation dead in its track, but it is worth mentioning that we are broadcasting this live using Dialogue. Now, this call is not only brought to you by Dialogue, but really, if you're into broadcasting or podcasting or absolutely anything where you just have a passion, you want to talk about something, Dialogue is extremely easy to use. I use it because I think that, giving MMA fans these kind of short analysis, debate, gossip, ramblings, whatever you want to call them, is a lot more convenient for a lot of MMA fans than sitting around for an hour, 2 hours, or whatever and listening to podcasts. So to try out podcasts, just click host a call. It's so easy to get started. You can host call-ins, do live broadcasts, and it's basically live talk radio over social media about trending topics and things like that. And really, we have jumped knee deep into this thing and kind of actually dove head first into Dialogue, and we plan to continue to do that because of its limitless potential. But anyways, back to the conversation about Mr. Covington. To see that Dana White used this, some people might say, okay, Dana White, did he have an agenda? But then you got to remember, Colby Covington is so unliked by the masses. Like you mentioned earlier, the stuff he did in Brazil and things like that, whether you agree with his politics or not, that's just human nature shit that's not right to do. And anybody with kind of, the common sense of the world we live in, common sense understanding of the world we live in today knows what he said about Brazilians and things like that isn't really what we want at all the UFC to be about. We don't want this in the UFC. Nobody does. I don't think long term we're going to have to deal with Mr. Covington too long. Yes, he beat, he did get the interim championship. I think he beat RDA to get that title. Can't remember because I've heard so much out of his mouth since then. But I think the welterweight division has so much talent coming up. I do not believe that Covington is going to be able to keep pace and sustain his kind of early success that he's had with guys like Till coming up, and even a guy like, I think Santiago Ponzinibbio would wipe the floor with Colby Covington. I really do.
I mean, Santiago Ponzinibbio, Darren Till. I mean, there's a whole mix of
characters. God, there's
young guys coming up through the welterweight division. I couldn't agree with you less, actually. I mean, he won that fight convincingly against RDA.
Yeah.
Damian Maia in kind of the same fashion as Tyron Woodley did. Now, you look at the fight that Covington had with Maia versus the one that blanking here, Woodley had with Maia.
Yeah.
Maia was on a downturn, and he came out and told reporters, I've got 4 fights left on my UFC contract. I'm going to fight them out, and then that's pretty much it. So you kind of wonder, a guy with that kind of mindset, how's he going to fight? But at the same time, Covington outstruck him, was able to win that fight. He's got wins over Stun Gun, Dong Hyun Kim, Brian Barberena, Max Griffin, who's a great boxer, and he knocked him out, got the TKO win there. So, I think Covington still has a bright future. It's kind of a shame, really. I mean, as much as we might not like interim titles, he was more or less the number 1 contender, if you will. And they just kind of strip it because he decided that he couldn't take the fight on such short notice. And I mean, how many times has a great ranked fighter said, probably behind closed doors, and we don't even know, geez, I can't take the fight, I'm injured, I have something personal going on. I mean, we have fighters like George St. Pierre coming back off a huge layoff to fight for a title. So I think Colby Covington's kind of in a bad spot here. I don't think it's of his own doing. And it was a little strange to see him going to the White House with Dana White.
In the octagon, you're right. It is not of his own doing in terms of his performances in the octagon. The negative crap that's come his way is because of what he's done outside of the octagon. So you're right. I mean, in terms of him just as a fighter, the thing that I don't give too much credit, the reason I don't give too much credit to his win over RDA is because I've always felt that RDA, Rafael Dos Anjos, doesn't have that killer instinct. Same with kind of Damian Maia also doesn't. He isn't. I mean, he's an exceptional fighter, former lightweight champion. We get all that, but he's never had that. I don't know, that thing that Conor McGregor possesses. A lot of guys who can go in for the kill like that have in the UFC. So I'm not going to give. Although RDA was on such a roll before running into Covington, so you kind of have to, I don't know. Long term, I don't think Covington's a good enough striker to match with guys like Till. Like if we were to see Till, the Thompson Till kind of set up between, let's say, Till and Covington, I think Covington would have got buried because it's just not the right fight for him.
Yeah, it's a tough
guys.
Tough matchup to make. The only thing I could say to that is the fact that if you watched any of the lead up to that RDA fight, I mean, Covington trains at ATT. His main training partner, Jorge Masvidal, one of the best pure boxers out there. So he's got a great friend in Masvidal, which is something that you probably won't hear Colby Covington having friends, but he's got a great friend and training partner in Masvidal and a great guy to learn from. So I think, he's only going to progress with his striking. He's got top tier wrestling to fall back on. And if he could polish the striking and maybe his jiu-jitsu, he could be a real force.
Okay, so then basically my question to you, Mr. Greg Allen, is who does Covington fight next if he's not fighting for the title, which we know he's not?
Great question. I mean, today it was announced that for UFC Moncton, we're going to have Volkan Oezdemir, and he's going to be taking on Anthony Smith. Now, my pick for the main event for that was some type of fight for Leon Edwards. I mean, he's
Yeah,
available. He's been rising up through the ranks in the welterweight
but
division. That could be
but after
something.
Smith did what he did and his popularity, I think I could see that fight even being the main event.
Yeah.
Just because he's yeah. So I know what you mean. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, Leon Edwards is a guy in the welterweight division, doesn't have a fight, coming off a win in his last against Donald Cerrone. That's a potential fight. I mean, there's all sorts of different matchups to make. Like we both said, I mean, it's a really deep division, and that top 15 just seems to grow and change as it goes.
A lot of versatility to a lot of different styles in that top 10, that
Hmm.
top five. A lot of opposing styles, strikers, stand up guys. Like, and I completely So I mean, basically, who do you got?
As
Give us
far
a name.
as
One name for Covington besides Edwards or something. Like, would you think that Covington Thompson would be something that could happen?
I mean, it'd be an interesting fight. The only trouble is, I mean, Thompson coming off a loss, you kind of want him to not fight a scrub, but
Yeah.
you want Stephen Thompson to win his next fight for sure, more or
But
less. I
Stephen
mean,
Thompson is notorious for the whole fight forward ideology, like most fighters are. But he really likes sticking to that, which is one of the issues why he did not want to fight Darren Till
yeah,
initially.
that's true. I mean,
Um,
Thompson's ranked fourth right now. You've got Robbie
yeah,
Lawler at five. Doesn't really
I
have
see.
a
I
fight.
I think Covington should fight Lawler before, and the winner of Covington Lawler
Yeah,
should get the winner of Woodley Till.
yeah, and that's totally fair. I mean, you want to see a former champion and Robbie
Yeah.
Lawler fight at the top again. Yep.
And if Covington beats Robbie Lawler, I will shut up about Colby Covington. I will be unbelievably impressed. I will be pleasantly surprised. I will be proven wrong and happy to do so because it'll be better for the sport. So, with that, we will wrap up the second episode of the Talktagon, which I said is brought to you by Dialogue. Remember to get the call started on Dialogue. It's so easy. Go to dialogue.com, hit host a call, and you can broadcast live audio events over social media on basically anything that you're passionate about. So, thank you to my co-host, Mr. Craig Allen, of the Fight Night Picks podcast, and many other MMA mediums and contents. You can reach him at Craig Allen FNP on Twitter or hit Mr. Allen up on Facebook. And again, my name is Ty O'Keefe. You can catch my content on Fansided MMA and the Fight Network. And you can find me on Twitter at Above the Fold Ty and on Facebook under Ty O'Keefe MMA. So thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time, this is how we get down on the Talktagon.